Masters, next time ask before you borrow my contacts.
Dune! Literally one of the best pieces of science fiction I ever did read. The book was published in 1965 and written by Frank Herbert. I should warn you about his writing style. It is very difficult to follow. It almost reminds me of Tolkien's writing style. I am gonna say this. Dune is dense, but not as dense as the Silmarillion. And because Dune is so dense, I'm going to give a very bare-bones summary of the story since there are so many characters to track and so much going on with everything that it's going to be hard for me to keep this video at a reasonable length. I literally could spend hours going over the summary and each individual character of the book, and I'd still have more stuff to cover. Also, I'm not going to go over much of the culture of this futuristic society since that would also take literal hours to cover. There's also a lot of information about the world. Now here's the interesting thing. There is enough information about the world that's important to the plot to satisfy the reader. Literally most of the density of the book is about the culture of the Fremen and all of the thoughts of each individual character since this book is written in the omniscient perspective style of writing. And that's very difficult to pull off correctly. Anyways, so the story of Dune takes place thousands of years into the future. I think the specific year span is 10,191 to 10,193. It doesn't really specify, but in the appendix of the book, it lists the births and deaths of some of the major characters, leading me to come to the conclusion that the book likely starts in the late part of 10,190 and ends sometime in the middle of 10,193. Alright, the story begins on Caladan, the homeworld of House Atreides. Paul, the son of Duke Leto Atreides, must undergo an important test to prove whether he is animal or man. The test of the Gom Jabbar is how the Bene Gesserit test human awareness. How it works is that the student would stick her hand inside a box that causes a lot of pain, and if the student makes any noise or reacts to the pain verbally, they are considered an animal and are struck down by a poison needle called the Gom Jabbar. Paul passes the test, being the only man to pass. Now why is Paul so different? Well, Bene Gesserit usually consists of women, and Paul's mother, Jessica, is Bene Gesserit. She has been teaching Paul the ways of the Bene Gesserit against the wishes of her superiors. Here's what's going on at the moment. The Harkonnens, sworn enemy of the Atreides house, have been in control of the desert planet Arrakis, or Dune, for so long and have been doing shady business practices in the process. So the Emperor has decided to give Arrakis to House Atreides, knowing that they would control the spice flow a lot better. So, Duke Leto and the rest of his house are preparing to move to sandworm-infested Arrakis to watch over the spice production and flow. Now, what is this spice? It's literally the life force of this entire universe. It is used for space travel, food, religious rituals, etc. It's also quite addictive. Simply withdrawing from spice could kill a man. And it's all over Arrakis. Now, everyone moves to Arrakis, totally not suspecting the evil plans that are going on at the moment. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is not pleased with the Emperor's decision and plots to take back Arrakis, so he hatches a plan. The plan is that a member of the Duke's household, a doctor by the name of Yue, will betray the Atreides house by knocking out the Duke, Jessica, and Paul and sending them off to die, leaving nothing of House Atreides. Then the Baron plans to put his nephew Raban in charge of Arrakis to cause all sorts of pain to the native Fremen people and increase spice production. Of course, this will cause the people to get angry, but then the Baron will remove Raban and send in Raban's little brother, Feyd-Rautha, the Baron's heir, to be their savior, thus obtaining more spice and more money. Now, how do they get Yue on their side? The Harkonnens are known for dealing business in shady matters. They basically kidnap Yue's wife and kill her, but Yue doesn't know that they killed her. The Baron told him that he can join his wife after he does the deed. Now while all this is going on, Duke Leto is trying to befriend the Fremen people in order to gain desert power. With the trust of the native people, he'll be able to increase spice production and get more money. He has gained the trust of some of the Fremen people, but his attempts are futile, as it isn't long before the Baron's plan is carried out. Well, Yue does the deed. However, he did leave one surprise for the Baron. Since the Baron really wanted to monologue and gloat about how his evil plan worked right, Yue implanted a tooth containing a pill full of a poisonous gas in Leto's mouth. The plan was for Leto to break the tooth and release the gas into the room so that it would kill the Baron. By a stroke of luck, the Baron survives, but Leto is dead. Meanwhile, in the desert, where Paul and Jessica are about to get dumped into the open desert for the sandworms to find, both manage to escape and make their way to the Fremen people, and hope to gain their trust. Well, apparently, Paul has been showing a bunch of signs that were prophesied to the Fremen people many, many years ago, so they quickly trust him. Paul and Jessica are trained by them, and train them in their way of fighting. They spend 2 years with the Fremen. Now, during these 2 years, Paul has adopted the name Muad'Dib, and the Fremen people have been talking about him all over. Soon this reaches the Baron's ears, but he doesn't really think much of it, since he plans to wipe out the Fremen people soon. Also, it seems the Emperor was in on the Baron's little scheme, since House Atreides was proving to be a problem to the throne. 2 years in the making, Paul finally decides to carry out his ultimate plan of revenge, and his hope to bring life to Baron Arrakis through use of weather machines. Paul knows of a way to destroy the spice, thus destroying life in this universe as they know it. The Emperor happens to be in the area at this time, and that is when they launch their attack. The Baron is killed by Paul's little sister, and it isn't long before Raban is killed as well. Paul also kills Feyd-Rautha in a duel to the death. Now, Paul meets with the Emperor and explains to him that he desires the throne, or he will destroy the spice. Now, the only way to make this peace is for Paul to marry one of the Emperor's daughters, specifically Princess Irulan, a name you see frequently throughout the chapter headings. Now, that's where the book ends. It's implied that the Emperor surrenders and Paul marries Princess Irulan. Now, I'm very aware that Dune has many, many sequels. I haven't read them, and I don't plan to, since I believe that Dune ended just fine the way it was. But I have heard that the sequels are pretty good. Maybe one day I'll take a look at them, but I don't know if I'll be looking at them for Masters of Literature. Now, I want to keep this analysis brief, since there are many themes within Dune that I could go over to the point where it would take hours to explain it all. There was a lot of religious themes within Dune. Paul was prophesied in not one culture, but 2. The Bene Gesserit prophesied of a Kwisatz Haderach, a male Bene Gesserit who could see everything and be everywhere. The Fremen culture had a similar prophecy of an off-worlder who could bring life to Arrakis. It's really fascinating how different the cultures are in this story. Because this book is from the omniscient point of view, the reader gets to know all of the thoughts of various characters, so you know exactly what is going on from the beginning. It's a little frustrating because you actually know right off the bat that Dr. Yue is going to betray House Atreides. Also, there's a lot of mental battles going on, since Bene Gesserit can read tiny expressions in people and know exactly how to pitch their voice so they can command anyone to do what they want. It's kind of like a battle of wits. I don't know why, but it's really fascinating to me. I guess one more important thing to point out is that, like other science fiction novels, Dune makes you think. When you learn about the Fremen culture, you'll understand. It makes you wonder if what Paul is doing is actually a good thing. What if Paul causes the war that he kept seeing in his visions? Now, let's get into that, actually. The descriptions of Paul's visions, they change all the time. It shows how we really don't know what the future holds for us. There's even a moment when Paul mentions that he said something else in a specific vision that had already come to pass. And later on in the book, Paul has a difficult time differentiating between the past and the future. I think that's one of the more accurate portrayals of what it would feel like to be able to see the future. You'd eventually get to a point where it all just blurs together and you can't tell what's already happened or what is to come. Now again, there's a lot more themes in Dune that you could get out of this. Honestly, I'd strongly recommend you read it yourself and see what you get out of it. Alright, let's address the elephant in the room. There were 2 movie adaptations of Dune and 1 miniseries. I know absolutely nothing about the miniseries, which was released in the year 2000, but I do know about the 2 movie adaptations. The 1984 adaptation was pretty decent, but again, a lot of stuff was left out. I think what bothered me the most was the story was changed slightly to be about something completely different rather than about all of the cultural stuff that was happening within. Plus, the special effects are, well, 80s. Very 80s. Plus, it covered the whole story and ended differently. I can understand why it ended differently, but it just didn't hit right. Now, the recent 2021 Part 1 adaptation covered the first third of the book to the point where Paul and Jessica find the Fremen. Again, a lot of stuff was left out, but I can understand that since the book is quite dense and covers a lot of stuff happening internally. Plus, there was a lot more focus on Paul, the main protagonist, instead of a focus on everyone. That I can also understand since Paul's story is the main one. Honestly, I feel like this movie is a solid adaptation of the first third of the book in the way that the Lord of the Rings films are solid adaptations of the books. I'd actually recommend going out to see it if you can, and I'm very excited to see Part 2 in 2 years. Overall, the book is very well written. While it is dense, it does make you think. And I'm very sure we will all have different interpretations of what the story is telling us, and maybe different things will stand out. I did leave out a lot of the plot and information about the world since that would take hours, but I'd recommend checking out the book yourself. I'd recommend this for ages 15 and up. Again, the book is rather dense and it will definitely take you longer than you thought to finish it. Also, make sure you have a water bottle next to you half the time since the story never fails to remind you that Arrakis is a desert planet and lacks water. Trust me, you will gain a better appreciation for water after you read it. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about how awesome Dune is. Again, I'd strongly recommend you read it and watch the recent 2021 adaptation. I enjoyed it immensely. Happy reading!